He slammed the door on his 1-year-old black daughter without a second thought. 2 decades later, the world knew her face, and he came crawling back. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. The delivery room had been a cacophony of beeping monitors and urgent voices, but now Thomas Harrison stood in stunned silence, staring at the newborn in the hospital bassinet. Her skin was several shades darker than his own, unmistakably black. At 29, Thomas had imagined this moment differently. He had pictured holding his child, feeling that instant connection everyone talked about. Instead, confusion and anger churned inside him as he looked at his wife, Adrienne, who was resting in the hospital bed after 19 hours of labor. "Is there something you want to tell me?" His voice was low, controlled, but trembling with barely suppressed rage. Adrienne turned to him, exhaustion etched in the lines of her face, but there was also fear flickering in her eyes. "What are you talking about?" Thomas gestured sharply at the baby. "That's not my child." "Of course she's your child. Thomas, what are you saying?" Adrienne struggled to sit up, wincing at the pain. "Don't lie to me." He leaned closer, his voice a harsh whisper. "That baby is black. I'm white. You're white. Do you think I'm an idiot?" Adrienne's face crumpled. "Thomas, please. My grandmother was black. I've shown you pictures of her. I told you about this possibility. One distant relative doesn't explain this." Thomas cut her off, his voice rising. A nurse at the door paused, sensing the tension, but Thomas lowered his voice again. "You've been unfaithful. Just admit it." Tears streamed down Adrienne's face. "I've never been with anyone else. She's your daughter, Thomas. The doctors can do a paternity test if you don't believe me." Thomas straightened, his jaw clenched. "I don't need a test to see what's right in front of me. I'm calling a lawyer tomorrow." 1 year later, Thomas had made good on his threat. Despite the paternity test confirming he was indeed the baby's biological father, he had filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. He had fought viciously to avoid paying child support, claiming fraud and deception, though the court had eventually ordered him to pay a minimal amount. Now, standing in the doorway of the small apartment Adrienne had managed to rent, he felt nothing as he looked at the 1-year-old girl toddling unsteadily across the worn carpet. "Thomas, please reconsider," Adrienne pleaded, her once vibrant face now permanently etched with worry lines. "Zora needs her father." "That's not my concern," Thomas replied coldly. "I've come to tell you I'm moving to Chicago for a new job. The support payments will continue as ordered, but I want nothing else to do with either of you." "You can't just abandon your daughter. The test proved—" "I don't care what the test says," Thomas interrupted. "Look at her, Adrienne. She doesn't look like me. She doesn't look like us. Every time I see her, all I can think about is how you must have betrayed me." "I never betrayed you." Adrienne's voice broke. "Genetic inheritance is complicated. The doctors explained this." Thomas shook his head, glancing at the little girl who had stopped playing and was now watching them with wide, intelligent eyes. Those eyes, he had to admit, were shaped exactly like his mother's. But the rich brown skin, the tight curls forming a halo around her head, that wasn't from his side of the family. "I don't want to be tied to this situation anymore," Thomas said firmly. "I'll comply with the court order, but that's it. I'm starting fresh in Chicago." Little Zora took that moment to walk unsteadily toward Thomas, arms outstretched, a gummy smile revealing dimples in her chubby cheeks. Thomas stepped back as if she carried something contagious. "Don't you feel anything for her?" Adrienne asked, scooping up the child before she could reach Thomas. "She's your blood." Thomas looked at the child, who was now nestling against her mother's shoulder, those familiar eyes, his mother's eyes, peering at him curiously. For a split second, something stirred in his chest, but he quickly suppressed it. "Goodbye, Adrienne. The lawyer will have my new contact information if there's an emergency." He turned and walked out, ignoring Adrienne's call of his name, ignoring the soft babble of the child. As he drove away, he glanced in the rearview mirror at the dilapidated apartment building. Adrian stood in the doorway, Zora in her arms. He felt a momentary twinge of something. Not quite guilt, not quite regret. But by the time he reached the highway, he had convinced himself he was doing the right thing. The child was a reminder of what he perceived as the greatest betrayal of his life. Despite what science said, despite what the doctors explained about genetic inheritance and recessive genes, he couldn't accept her as his own. In his mind, that shade of brown couldn't possibly have come from his bloodline. In Chicago, Thomas rebuilt his life. He rose quickly in his new firm, his ambition and drive unencumbered by family responsibilities. He dated occasionally but never seriously. Something always held him back from commitment, though he never examined what that something might be. Years passed, and he rarely thought of Adrian or the child he had left behind. When he did, it was with a distant, clinical detachment, as if they were characters in a movie he had once watched, rather than people with whom he had shared his life. The child support payments were automatic withdrawals from his account. The only updates he received came in the form of annual school photographs that Adrian insisted on sending, despite his lack of response. These envelopes usually went straight into a drawer, unopened. Thomas Harrison had effectively erased Adrian and Zora from his life, or so he believed. But the universe has a way of bringing full circle the connections we try hardest to sever, and Thomas would eventually discover that some bonds, whether acknowledged or not, are impossible to break completely. He would learn that the blood running through Zora's veins was undeniably his own, that the dimples that flashed when she smiled, the same dimples that had charmed his business associates, were his genetic contribution. But that realization was still many years away, waiting patiently for the moment when he would be forced to confront the magnitude of his mistake. Adrian Harrison, she had kept her married name for Zora's sake, watched her 5-year-old daughter twirl in front of the mirror in their new apartment. It wasn't much bigger than their last place, but it was in a better school district, which had become Adrian's priority as Zora approached kindergarten age. "Mama, do I look pretty?" Zora asked, her voice lilting with excitement for her first day of school. She wore a yellow dress that Adrian had found at a thrift store and carefully mended and washed until it looked nearly new. "You look beautiful, baby," Adrian said, her heart swelling with love and pride. Zora was growing into a stunning child, with delicate features, expressive eyes, and those dimples that appeared whenever she smiled, dimples that were an exact match to Thomas's. Adrian had done her best over the past 4 years to create a stable life for Zora. She had gone back to school at night to earn her nursing degree while working days as a receptionist. Her mother had moved in with them to help with childcare, and together they were managing to give Zora a loving, if modest, upbringing. The child support checks from Thomas arrived like clockwork, but they were the bare minimum the court had ordered. Adrian never spent that money on herself. Every penny went into a college fund for Zora. She was determined that her daughter would have opportunities she herself had never had. "Will the other kids like me?" Zora asked suddenly, her expression becoming serious. "Of course they will," Adrian assured her, though she felt a pang of anxiety. She had chosen this school partly because of its diverse student body, hoping Zora wouldn't feel out of place. But she knew children could be cruel, and Zora's situation was complicated. "What if they ask about my daddy?" Zora persisted, her large eyes, so like Thomas's mother's, fixed on Adrian's face. Adrian had prepared for this question, had rehearsed her answer, but it still hurt to hear it spoken aloud. "You can tell them that your daddy lives far away," she said carefully, "and that you live with your mama and grandma who love you very much." Zora seemed to consider this, her small brow furrowed in thought. "But when will I meet him?" Adrian swallowed hard. "I don't know, sweetie, but right now we need to finish getting ready for school. You don't want to be late on your first day, do you?" The distraction worked, and soon they were walking hand in hand to the elementary school 3 blocks away. Adrian's mother had already left for her job at the local grocery store, but she had prepared a special breakfast for Zora's big day and promised a celebration dinner that evening. As they approached the colorful building with children streaming in through the doors, Adrian felt Zora's hand tighten in hers. "You're going to have a wonderful day," she promised, kneeling down to be at eye level with her daughter. "And I'll be right here when school gets out." Zora nodded bravely, but her lower lip trembled slightly. Then she squared her small shoulders and kissed Adrian's cheek. "I love you, Mama. I love you too. More than anything in this world." Adrian watched as her daughter joined the line of kindergartners being led inside by a smiling teacher. Zora turned once to wave, and then she was gone, swallowed up by the school building and this new phase of life. Adrian stood watching long after the doors had closed, wiping away tears. She was proud of her brave little girl, but she was also afraid of the challenges Zora would face. And always, there was the anger simmering beneath the surface. Anger at Thomas for rejecting their beautiful daughter, for missing these precious moments, for forcing Adrian to answer impossible questions. That night, as predicted, Zora bubbled over with stories about her first day, the friends she'd made, the books they'd read, the pictures she'd drawn of their family, Mama, Grandma, and herself, standing in front of a house with a rainbow overhead. "Mrs. Collins asked if I wanted to add anyone else to my picture," Zora said between bites of her grandmother's special lasagna. "I told her no, this is my family." Adrian and her mother exchanged glances over Zora's head, a world of understanding passing between them. "That's right, honey," Adrian's mother said, reaching over to pat Zora's hand. "We're your family, and we love you to the moon and back." The years passed in a blur of school projects, dance recitals, and doctor appointments. Adrian completed her nursing degree and secured a better-paying job at the local hospital. They moved to a small house with a yard where Zora could play. Life was still a struggle financially, but they were managing. By the time Zora was 10, she had stopped asking about her father. The annual school photos that Adrian dutifully sent to Thomas's address in Chicago never received acknowledgement, and Adrian had long since stopped expecting any. She had dated occasionally, but nothing serious had developed, partly because her focus remained firmly on raising Zora and advancing her nursing career, and partly because the wound of Thomas's rejection had left scars that made it difficult to trust. Zora was thriving despite, or perhaps because of, the strong female influences in her life. She excelled academically, showed talent in dance and art, and had developed a quiet confidence that impressed her teachers. But there were moments when Adrienne caught her daughter staring at families with fathers present, or when Father's Day projects at school brought a shadow of sadness to her expressive eyes. On Zora's 12th birthday, after the small celebration with friends had ended and Zora's grandmother had gone to bed, Adrienne found her daughter sitting on the back porch steps, gazing up at the stars. "Room for one more?" Adrienne asked, settling beside her when Zora nodded. They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes before Zora spoke. "Mom, I found the box in your closet." Adrienne's heart skipped a beat. She knew immediately which box Zora meant, the one containing her wedding photos, Thomas's letters from their courtship, and the results of the paternity test that had proven Zora was his biological child. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you," Zora continued, her voice small but steady. "I was looking for my birthday present last week and found it instead." Adrienne took a deep breath. "I should have shown it to you before. I just wasn't sure when the right time would be." "He didn't want me because I'm black, didn't he?" Zora asked, turning to look directly at her mother, those familiar eyes searching for truth. "It's more complicated than that," Adrienne began, but Zora shook her head. "Mom, I read the letters. I saw the test results. He thought you cheated because I came out dark-skinned. But I'm his daughter. The test proved it." Adrienne wrapped an arm around Zora's shoulders, pulling her close. "Yes, you are his biological daughter. My grandmother was black, as you know. Sometimes genes express themselves in ways that skip generations. But your father, he couldn't accept that explanation. Even with scientific proof? Even then, Adrian confirmed sadly. Sometimes people see what they want to see, believe what they want to believe, regardless of facts. Zora was quiet for a long moment, processing this. Does he still send the child support checks? Yes, but I've been saving that money for your college fund. I've never used it for our living expenses. Zora nodded as if this information confirmed something for her. I don't want his money anymore, she said firmly. We don't need it. Sweetie, that money is rightfully yours. It can help give you opportunities. I don't want anything from someone who rejected me just because of how I look, Zora interrupted, a new hardness in her voice that Adrian had never heard before. I'll get scholarships. I'll work. We'll figure it out. Adrian hugged her daughter tighter, feeling both heartbreak and fierce pride. We'll talk about the money when you're older, she said gently. But I want you to know something important. Your father's inability to see past his own prejudice has nothing to do with your worth. You are amazing, Zora Harrison, and don't you ever forget it. At 16, Zora Harrison stood nearly 5'10", her long limbs graceful from years of dance training. She had grown into her features beautifully, high cheekbones, almond-shaped eyes that crinkled when she laughed, and those distinctive dimples that appeared whenever she smiled. Her rich brown skin glowed with health, and her natural curls formed a glorious crown around her face. She was sitting in the guidance counselor's office at her high school, discussing college applications. Mrs. Rodriguez, who had been mentoring Zora since freshman year, spread several brochures across her desk. Your grades and extracurriculars make you a strong candidate for these schools, she explained, pointing to several prestigious universities. And with your dance background, you might qualify for some performing arts scholarships as well. Zora nodded, examining the glossy pamphlets. Her mother had been saving for her education since she was a baby, and they had agreed that Zora would apply for every scholarship possible to make up the difference. The child support money from her father remained untouched in a separate account. Zora had refused to consider using it, despite her mother's practical arguments. I've been thinking about something else too, Zora said hesitantly. A few people have suggested I try modeling. Mrs. Rodriguez looked up with interest. I'm not surprised. You certainly have the height and presence for it. My dance instructor knows someone at a local agency. She thinks I could book some jobs while I'm in school, maybe help pay for college. Zora twisted her hands in her lap. I haven't told my mom yet. I'm not sure what she'll think. Modeling can be a tough industry, Mrs. Rodriguez cautioned. But you're level-headed, and if you're doing it with clear goals in mind, it could be a good opportunity. Why don't you research some reputable agencies and then discuss it with your mother? That evening, Zora broached the subject over dinner. Her grandmother, now retired and dealing with arthritis but still sharp as ever, listened intently as Zora explained her interest in modeling. Ms. Diane says I could start with local commercials, maybe some print work, Zora concluded. The money could help with college and I could work around my school schedule. Adrian set down her fork, her expression thoughtful. At 45, she had risen to become a nursing supervisor at the hospital, and the years of hard work showed in the fine lines around her eyes. But she was still beautiful, and Zora had always been proud of her mother's strength and determination. I've actually been waiting for you to bring this up, Adrian admitted with a small smile. 3 different people have approached me in the past year asking if you've ever considered modeling. Really? Zora was surprised. You never mentioned it. I wanted it to be your idea, if it was something you were interested in. Adrienne reached across the table to take Zora's hand. You're certainly beautiful enough, but that industry can be brutal, especially for young women of color. I know, Zora said, squeezing her mother's hand. I've been reading about it. But things are changing, Mom. There's more diversity now, more opportunities for someone who looks like me. Adrienne nodded slowly. If this is something you want to pursue, we'll look into reputable agencies together. But education comes first, always. and at the first sign that it's affecting your mental health or self-image, we reevaluate. Deal? Deal, Zora agreed, breaking into a smile that revealed her dimples. Zora's grandmother chuckled. Lord, when you smile like that, you look just like… She stopped abruptly, glancing at Adrian. Like Dad, Zora finished quietly. It's okay, Grandma. I know I have his dimples. A brief silence fell over the table. They rarely discussed Thomas directly, though his absence had shaped their family in countless ways. Speaking of him, Adrian said carefully, there's something we should discuss. Your 18th birthday is coming up next year, and legally, the child support will end then. Zora shrugged. Good. We've never needed his money. Actually, honey, there's quite a bit in that account now, Adrian explained. I've been investing it over the years. It's your money rightfully. You could use it for college, for a car, for whatever you decide. Zora frowned, conflicted. The stubborn part of her wanted to continue rejecting anything connected to the father who had rejected her. But the practical side, the part that had watched her mother work double shifts and her grandmother stretch every dollar, recognized the opportunity this money represented. I'll think about it, she finally said. But if I do use it, it'll be because I've earned it by surviving and thriving without him, not because he's done anything to deserve being in my life. The first modeling job came 3 months later, a local department store's back-to-school campaign. Zora was one of 5 teens selected to showcase the new fall line. The pay was modest, but the experience was invaluable, and the photographer praised her natural poise and expressive face. You've got something special, he told her as they wrapped up the shoot. Those dimples are gold. They make every smile look genuine, and the camera loves your bone structure. More jobs followed, a billboard for a local credit union, another print campaign for a regional healthcare provider, and a TV commercial for a chain of dance studios where she actually got to demonstrate some of her ballet training. Each job built her confidence and added to her college fund. By the time she turned 17, Zora had signed with a more established agency in a neighboring city and was beginning to book more significant jobs. She maintained her excellent grades and continued with dance, though she had scaled back her practice hours to accommodate her modeling work. We've had interest from some agencies in New York, her agent Marlene told her during a meeting that Adrian also attended. They've seen your portfolio. There's a big push for more diverse faces right now, and your look is exactly what they're after. Natural, fresh, distinctive. New York? Adrian questioned, concern evident in her voice. Zora's still in high school. I'm not suggesting she move there now, Marlene clarified. But it might be something to consider after graduation. There are agencies that work specifically with young models, helping them balance education and career. Many models attend college while working. Zora glanced at her mother, seeing the worry behind her composed expression. I'm still planning on college, Mom, she assured her. That hasn't changed. I know, honey. I just want to make sure you have all the normal experiences of growing up, not just work. The great thing about Zora, Marlene interjected, is that she has a good head on her shoulders, and having a supportive family is huge in this industry. Many young models don't have that foundation. On the drive home, Zora and Adrian discussed the possibilities that were opening up. I could apply to schools in New York, Zora suggested. NYU or Columbia. That way I could model and study. Adrian kept her eyes on the road, but Zora could see she was processing this idea. Those are expensive schools, she finally said. I've been saving from my modeling jobs, Zora reminded her. And there are scholarships. Plus, she hesitated. I've been thinking about the other money, the child support. Adrian glanced at her quickly before returning her attention to the road. Oh? Maybe it's time I used it for what it was intended for, my future, Zora said, her voice steady despite the complexity of emotions the subject always stirred. It doesn't mean I forgive him, or that I want him in my life. It just means I'm pragmatic enough to use every resource available to me. Adrian reached over and squeezed her daughter's hand. That's a very mature perspective. I had a good teacher, Zora replied with a small smile. As senior year progressed, Zora's modeling work continued to increase in prominence. A national teen magazine featured her in a spread about up-and-coming young dancers, and a major athletic wear brand selected her for a regional campaign. Her distinctive look, the combination of her graceful height, warm brown skin, and those captivating dimples, was proving to be marketable. College acceptance letters began arriving in the spring, including offers from her top choices in New York, along with substantial scholarship packages. Zora felt as though she were standing on the precipice of something extraordinary, her future unfurling before her with possibilities her younger self could never have imagined. What she couldn't know, was that her increasing visibility was about to intersect with her past in ways she had never anticipated. For as Zora's face began appearing in more prominent campaigns, it was only a matter of time before Thomas Harrison would look up from his morning coffee and find himself staring into a pair of familiar dimples, his own, on the smiling face of the daughter he had chosen to forget. New York City embraced Zora with all its chaotic energy and endless possibilities. She had chosen NYU for its excellent dance program and proximity to the modeling industry, using a combination of scholarships, savings from her previous modeling work, and yes, the child support money that had accumulated over the years. Her mother and grandmother had come to help her settle into her dorm room, all three of them teary-eyed at this new chapter. "You call us any time, day or night," her grandmother insisted, straightening the bedspread for the third time. "And if this city gets to be too much, you come right home. No shame in that." "I'll be fine, Grandma," Zora assured her, though her own stomach was fluttering with nerves. "Mom and I have been planning this for ages." Adrian stood by the window, gazing out at the slice of city skyline visible from Zora's 10th-floor room. "It's a long way from our little house," she said softly. "Not so far," Zora replied, coming to stand beside her mother. "Just a plane ride, and I'll be home for holidays." After they left, Zora sat on her bed, taking in the reality of her new situation. Her roommate hadn't arrived yet, so she had this moment of quiet to herself. The wall above her desk was already adorned with photos. Her mother and grandmother, friends from high school, dance performances. A life well lived despite the absence that had shaped it. "New chapter," she whispered to herself, running a hand over her freshly trimmed curls. She had cut her hair shorter for the move to New York, embracing a more sophisticated look that her agent had suggested would be versatile for different types of modeling work. The first semester was a whirlwind of classes, auditions, and adjusting to city life. Zora's agency had arranged several go-sees, and she was beginning to book consistent work, mostly commercial print jobs and e-commerce for now, but each gig added to her portfolio and experience. "You're building a solid foundation," her agent Janine told her during a portfolio review 3 months in. "You have a distinctive look that clients remember, and your dance background gives you exceptional body awareness. That's rare in new models." "I'm enjoying the work," Zora admitted. "More than I expected to, actually." Janine smiled knowingly. "That's good, because I have some exciting news. Essence is doing a Fresh Faces feature, and they want to include you." Zora's eyes widened. Essence was a major publication, especially significant for Black women. "Are you serious?" "Completely. The shoot is next week. They're featuring 5 up-and-coming models of color, and they specifically requested you after seeing your athletic wear campaign." This opportunity marked a turning point. The Essence feature, which highlighted Zora's natural beauty and included a short interview about her dance background and college experience, caught the attention of several major clients. By the end of her freshman year, Zora had booked campaigns for a well-known cosmetics brand, a major department store, and was in talks for a jewelry line. "I told you those dimples were gold," her first photographer texted when the cosmetics campaign launched, showing Zora's face on a prominent billboard in Times Square. Balancing her increasing modeling success with her education proved challenging but manageable. Zora had inherited her mother's organizational skills and work ethic, carefully scheduling shoots around classes and using travel time on the subway to study. Her grades remained strong, though she had scaled back her dance classes to focus on commercial technique rather than pursuing performance. At the start of her sophomore year, a new opportunity arose that would catapult her career to another level. Vogue was planning a special issue celebrating diverse beauty, and Zora's agent submitted her portfolio. To their delight, the iconic magazine selected Zora for a 6-page spread featuring emerging models who were changing the face of fashion. "This is major," Janine emphasized when she called with the news. "Vogue is the pinnacle. This kind of exposure could lead to runway work with top designers, international campaigns. It opens every door." The Vogue shoot was unlike anything Zora had experienced before. The famed photographer created elaborate sets inspired by different cultural art forms, dressing Zora in couture that ranged from structured architectural pieces to flowing, ethereal gowns. In one standout image, she wore a crown of natural hair styled to resemble traditional African sculptures, her face luminous with minimal makeup that highlighted her bone structure and, of course, those signature dimples. When the issue hit newsstands, Zora's phone wouldn't stop buzzing with congratulatory messages. Her mother called in tears of pride, having already bought 5 copies of the magazine. "You look absolutely stunning, baby, like royalty." "Thanks, Mom," Zora said, still in a state of disbelief herself. "I keep thinking someone's going to pinch me and I'll wake up." "You've earned this," Adrian insisted. "Every bit of it. Your hard work, your professionalism, your talent. This is all you." The Vogue feature did indeed open doors. Designers who had previously overlooked Zora now requested her for their runway shows. Major brands reached out about ambassador roles. Her social media following exploded overnight, with young women around the world commenting on how refreshing it was to see someone who looked like them in the pages of high-fashion magazines. Amidst this sudden acceleration of her career, Zora remained grounded. She continued her studies, maintained close relationships with her mother and grandmother through frequent video calls, and developed a small circle of trusted friends in the industry. Other models who understood the unique pressures they faced and who looked out for one another. One of these friends, May, a Chinese-American model who had been in the industry several years longer than Zora, offered particularly valuable guidance. "The key is to know your worth and set boundaries early," she advised over coffee after they had both walked in a Fashion Week show. "This industry will take everything you're willing to give and then ask for more." "My mom said something similar," Zora acknowledged. "She was worried about me getting consumed by it all." "Smart woman, your mom," May said with a knowing smile. "The models who last are the ones who have an identity outside of this world. You have your education, your dance background. Those things keep you whole when this industry tries to reduce you to just a face or a body." By the middle of her sophomore year, Zora had achieved a level of success that seasoned models worked years to attain. She was now represented internationally, with agencies in Paris, Milan, and London in addition to New York. Her distinctive look, the perfect combination of classical beauty and modern edge, enhanced by those charming dimples that made every smile appear genuine, had become her trademark. A major skincare line approached her about becoming a global ambassador, a role that would involve a substantial financial contract and worldwide visibility. The timing was challenging. The campaign would shoot during her final exams, but the opportunity was too significant to pass up. "We can work with your schedule," the brand's creative director assured her during their meeting. "We value your education and want to support that. In fact, your commitment to balancing modeling and university is part of what attracted us to you as a representative of our brand." The resulting campaign was elegant and minimalist, Zora's natural beauty highlighted with dewy skin and subtle makeup, her expression confident and serene. The taglines emphasized authenticity and inner radiance, values that resonated with Zora personally. When the campaign launched globally, Her face appeared on billboards from Tokyo to London, in magazine spreads across 6 continents, and in digital ads that garnered millions of impressions. "I never imagined this level of success so quickly," she admitted to her mother during a rare weekend visit home. They were sitting on the back porch steps, just as they had that night years ago when Zora had first discovered the box containing her father's letters. "Sometimes it doesn't feel real." Adrian wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulders. "I always knew you were destined for extraordinary things. From the moment you were born, there was something special about you, a light that couldn't be dimmed no matter what." Zora leaned into her mother's embrace, feeling a rush of gratitude for this woman who had never wavered in her support and love. "None of this would have been possible without you, Mom. You know that, right? You did the work, honey. I just provided the safe place for you to grow." As they sat together in comfortable silence, Zora reflected on her journey so far. From the little girl who had wondered why she didn't have a father like her friends, to the teenager who had discovered her own strength and resilience, to the young woman now making her mark on the world, each phase had shaped her, hardships and all. What she didn't yet realize was that her increasing global visibility was about to force a confrontation with the very person who had chosen to miss all those phases of her life. For as Zora Harrison's face became ubiquitous in media around the world, it was only a matter of time before Thomas Harrison would be forced to recognize the daughter he had denied. Thomas Harrison's corner office on the 42nd floor offered a panoramic view of Chicago's skyline, a testament to how far he had climbed in the 20 years since he had left behind Adrian and the child he couldn't accept as his own. At 49, he had achieved everything he had set out to accomplish professionally. He was now a senior partner at one of the city's most prestigious financial firms, with a reputation for shrewd investment strategies and an uncanny ability to predict market trends. His personal life, however, remained curiously empty. He had never remarried, though he had engaged in a series of relationships that inevitably dissolved once they reached a certain point of seriousness. His spacious lakefront condo was impeccably designed but sterile, more like a luxury hotel suite than a home. He had friends, of course, colleagues he golfed with, women he dated, acquaintances he met for occasional dinners, but no one who truly knew him. Thomas was reviewing quarterly reports when his assistant, Sophia, knocked on his door with the day's mail and his usual afternoon coffee. "The Miller portfolio is up 12% this quarter," she noted, setting down the items on his desk. "And don't forget you have dinner with the Westbrook team tonight at 7. "Thank you, Sophia," Thomas replied absently, his attention already back on the reports. "Oh, and this came for you," she added, placing a large envelope on top of the stack of mail. "Looks important." After she left, Thomas sorted through the mail, pausing when he reached the oversized envelope. It had no return address, just his name and office address printed in a clean, unfamiliar font. Inside was a glossy magazine, the latest issue of Vogue, with a post-it note marking a page. "Thought you should see this," read the anonymous note. Curious and slightly irritated by the mysterious sender, Thomas flipped to the marked page and froze. A full-page advertisement for a luxury skincare line featured a striking young black woman with a familiar smile, dimples identical to his own punctuating her cheeks. The model's name was printed at the bottom of the page, Zora Harrison. Thomas stared at the image, his heart pounding unnaturally fast. He had received the school photos Adrian had sent over the years, but he had never opened them, and eventually they had stopped coming. This was the first time he had seen his daughter as an adult. The resemblance was undeniable, not just the dimples, but something in the set of her jaw, the shape of her eyes, the way she held herself with quiet confidence. His hands slightly shaking, Thomas turned to his computer and typed Zora's name into the search engine. Immediately, hundreds of results appeared. Professional modeling photos, interviews, runway videos, social media accounts with millions of followers. His daughter, it seemed, had become something of a sensation in the modeling world. He spent the next hour scrolling through images and articles, learning about the life of the child he had abandoned. Zora was studying dance and business at NYU while pursuing her modeling career. She had walked runways in New York, Paris, and Milan. She was an ambassador for several major brands and had been featured in multiple international fashion magazines. She was, by all accounts, not just successful but respected for her professionalism and intelligence. One interview in Essence particularly caught his attention. When asked about her background, Zora had mentioned being raised by her mother and grandmother. "They were all I needed," she was quoted as saying. "They taught me resilience, dignity, and the importance of creating your own path. I wouldn't be who I am without them." There was no mention of a father. Thomas sat back in his chair, a complex mixture of emotions washing over him. Pride, surprisingly, was among them. Pride in what his daughter had accomplished. But there was also shame, regret, and a gnawing sense of loss for all the years he had missed, all the milestones he had chosen to ignore. He looked again at the advertisement that had started this cascade of revelations. Zora's eyes seemed to look directly at him, challenging and assured. She had his mother's eyes, he realized with a jolt. The same eyes he had deliberately avoided seeing in the baby he had rejected. "Mr. Harrison?" Sophia's voice through the intercom startled him. "Your 4 o'clock is here." "Reschedule it," Thomas replied abruptly. "In fact, clear my schedule for the rest of the day. Something's come up." He drove home in a daze, the magazine on the passenger seat beside him. In his condo, he poured himself a scotch and continued his online exploration of his daughter's life and career. There were red carpet appearances, behind-the-scenes footage from photo shoots, interviews where she spoke eloquently about diversity in the fashion industry and her hopes to eventually start her own business combining her interests in fashion and dance. As night fell over Chicago, Thomas found himself standing at his floor-to-ceiling windows, drink in hand, staring unseeing at the city lights. How had he convinced himself all those years ago that this remarkable young woman couldn't possibly be his child? The evidence had always been there, not just in the paternity test that had scientifically confirmed their relationship, but in her features, in those distinctive Harrison dimples that had been passed down through generations of his family. He had been so caught up in his own assumptions, his own prejudices, that he had rejected irrefutable truth. And in doing so, he had deprived himself of watching this extraordinary person grow up. The realization was like a physical pain in his chest. The anonymous sender of the magazine, who could it have been? Someone who knew both him and Zora, obviously. Someone who had recognized the connection between them and decided it was time for Thomas to face what he had done. He mentally reviewed the possibilities but came up empty. He had been careful never to speak of Adrian or the child to anyone in his current life. The next morning, Thomas called his lawyer, Marcus, who had been handling his affairs for the past 15 years. "I need to find someone," Thomas explained after they had exchanged pleasantries. "My daughter." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I wasn't aware you had a daughter, Tom." "It's complicated," Thomas replied, unwilling to elaborate on his past mistakes to this man who knew him only as a successful, composed professional. "Her name is Zora Harrison. She's 21, lives in New York, works as a model. I need her contact information." "I see," Marcus said carefully. "May I ask why you're trying to reach her now?" The question hung in the air, forcing Thomas to confront his own motives. Was it mere curiosity? A sudden attack of conscience? Or something deeper, a genuine desire to know the daughter whose existence he had denied for 20 years? "I've made mistakes," Thomas finally said. "I'd like to try to rectify them if possible." "Understood," Marcus replied, his tone softening slightly. "I'll see what I can find out. Give me a day or two." True to his word, Marcus called back the following afternoon with the requested information. Zora had a professional website with contact details for her agency. She also maintained public social media accounts, though these were clearly managed with a professional eye and offered little personal information. "Thank you," Thomas said, jotting down the details. "There's one more thing. I'd like to set up a trust for her." A trust? Marcus sounded surprised. What kind of amount are we talking about? Substantial, Thomas replied. I've missed 20 years of supporting her properly. I want to make up for that. After ending the call, Thomas sat at his desk, staring at the contact information for his daughter's modeling agency. What was he hoping to accomplish? Would Zora even want to hear from him after all this time? And if she did agree to see him, what could he possibly say to justify his absence from her life? For the first time in decades, Thomas allowed himself to remember the day Zora was born, the shock he had felt upon seeing her brown skin, the immediate assumption that Adrian must have been unfaithful, the cold fury that had driven him to reject both his wife and newborn child. He had been so convinced of his own righteousness, so unwilling to consider explanations that contradicted his assumptions. Even when the paternity test had confirmed that Zora was biologically his daughter, he had refused to accept it, choosing instead to believe there must have been some mistake, some confusion at the lab. His pride and prejudice had been stronger than scientific evidence, stronger than the commitment he had made to Adrienne, stronger than the natural bond between father and child. What kind of man did that make him? The question haunted Thomas as he drafted and redrafted an email to Zora's agency. How do you begin a conversation with the child you abandoned? What words could possibly bridge such a chasm? In the end, he settled for directness. My name is Thomas Harrison. I am Zora Harrison's biological father. I have recently become aware of her success in the modeling industry and would like to establish contact with her. I understand that she may not wish to hear from me, given our history, but I hope she might be willing to meet. I can provide any verification of my identity that might be required. Thank you for your consideration. His finger hovered over the send button for a long moment before he finally pressed it. The email disappeared into the digital ether, carrying with it the potential to upend two carefully constructed lives, his own, built on the deliberate forgetting of his past mistakes, and Zora's, created in spite of his absence. As he closed his laptop, Thomas wondered what Adrienne would think of his sudden reappearance in their daughter's life. Would she encourage Zora to meet with him, or would she advise caution? Would she tell Zora about the man he had been 20 years ago, ambitious, prideful, and unwilling to accept truths that challenged his worldview? Or would she, with her characteristic generosity of spirit, focus instead on the possibility of reconciliation? Thomas didn't know if he deserved a chance to know his daughter after all this time. But as he looked again at the magazine advertisement that had started this journey of recognition, he hoped that Zora might find it in her heart to at least hear what he had to say. The rest would be up to her. The Manhattan Loft studio was awash in golden hour light as Zora moved fluidly through a series of poses for the camera. This shoot for an upcoming spring fashion editorial had already lasted 6 hours, but Zora showed no signs of fatigue. Her ability to remain present and engaged throughout long sessions was one of the qualities that had endeared her to photographers and creative directors across the industry. "Beautiful, Zora. Give me contemplative now, like you're thinking about something just beyond the frame," the photographer Devi instructed. Zora shifted subtly, her gaze becoming more introspective, her posture softening slightly. "Perfect. That's exactly what I wanted." As the assistant called the final shot, Zora relaxed, rolling her shoulders to release the tension of holding poses for hours. At 21, she had developed a reputation not just for her distinctive look, but for her professionalism and versatility. "That's a wrap, everyone," Devi announced. "Zora, you were exceptional as always. The client is going to love these." "Thanks, Devi. It was fun working with you again," Zora replied, accepting a robe from a production assistant and slipping it on over the delicate designer dress she had been modeling. In the changing area, as she carefully removed the expensive garments and wiped away the artfully applied makeup, Zora checked her phone. 3 missed calls from her agent, Janine, and a text message. "Call me ASAP. Important news." Concerned, Zora quickly finished changing into her street clothes, simple black jeans, a cream-colored sweater, and ankle boots, and called Janine. "Finally," Janine answered on the first ring. "I've been trying to reach you all afternoon. Sorry, I was shooting the Vogue editorial. What's going on? Is everything okay?" There was a brief pause. "I received an unusual email today, from someone claiming to be your father." Zora froze, her free hand gripping the edge of the makeup counter. "My father? Thomas Harrison?" "Yes. He says he recently became aware of your modeling career and wants to meet with you." A whirlwind of emotions swept through Zora: shock, anger, curiosity, and a deep-seated hurt that she thought she had long since processed. "Why now?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "He didn't specify in the email, just said he'd recently seen your work and wanted to establish contact. I wanted to talk to you before responding, or not responding. This is entirely your call, Zora." "I need to think," Zora said, her mind racing. "Can you forward me the email?" "Already done. And Zora? Take your time with this. There's no rush to make a decision." After ending the call, Zora gathered her things and left the studio, nodding distractedly to the crew members who called goodbyes. Outside, the early evening air was crisp with approaching autumn, the streets busy with commuters and tourists. She decided to walk the 20 blocks to her apartment, needing the movement to help process what she had just learned. Her father wanted to meet her. After 20 years of silence, of complete absence from her life, Thomas Harrison had suddenly decided to acknowledge her existence. The timing couldn't be coincidental. Her face was currently on billboards and in magazines worldwide. Had he seen her skincare campaign? Had someone pointed out the similarity in their smiles, those distinctive dimples that had become part of her professional signature? By the time Zora reached her apartment, a spacious one-bedroom in a converted industrial building that she had recently purchased with her modeling earnings, she had worked through the initial shock and was moving into analytical mode. She unlocked the door, dropped her bag on the entryway bench, and headed straight for her laptop. Thomas Harrison wasn't difficult to find online. He was a senior partner at a major financial firm in Chicago, with an impressive professional profile. Articles about his investment strategies appeared in business publications, and his firm's website featured a polished headshot that confirmed what Zora already knew from her mother's old photographs. They shared the same dimples, the same shaped eyes, though his were blue while hers were a deep brown. Next, she opened the email Janine had forwarded. Her father's message was brief, formal, and carefully worded. It revealed nothing about his motivations or what he hoped to achieve by contacting her now. Zora picked up her phone and called the one person who could help her make sense of this situation. "Hey, baby," Adrienne answered warmly. "How was the shoot?" "It was fine," Zora said, then cut to the chase. "Mom, he contacted me. Thomas. My father." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line, then silence. "Mom? Are you there?" "I'm here," Adrienne finally replied, her voice steady but tight. "What did he say?" Zora summarized the brief email. "I don't know what to do. Part of me wants to ignore it completely. He ignored me for 20 years. Why should I give him the time of day now? But another part is curious," Adrienne finished for her. "That's natural, honey. He's your biological father, and despite everything, it's normal to wonder about him, to want answers. What do you think I should do?" Adrienne sighed. "This has to be your decision, Zora, but I'll support whatever you choose. If you want to meet him, I understand. If you never want to speak to him, I understand that too." "Would you be upset if I did meet with him?" Zora asked, voicing the concern that had been nagging at her. "After everything he put you through?" "No, honey," Adrienne said softly. "This isn't about me and my history with Thomas. This is about you and what you need. The only thing that would upset me is if seeing him caused you pain." After talking with her mother for nearly an hour, Zora felt calmer, though no closer to a decision. She made herself a simple dinner and tried to focus on reviewing the schedule for her upcoming Paris Fashion Week appearances. but Thomas Harrison's email kept pulling at her attention. Why now? The question circled relentlessly in her mind. Was it mere curiosity on his part? Had he seen her success and decided to cash in on their connection somehow? Or was it possible he genuinely regretted his actions and wanted to make amends? The following morning, Zora met with Janine at the agency offices to discuss her Paris bookings. After handling the business matters, they turned to the elephant in the room. "Have you decided how you want to handle the email from your father?" Janine asked carefully. Zora nodded, having come to a decision during a restless night. "I want to meet him, not to let him back into my life necessarily, but to understand why he rejected me and why he's reaching out now." "I'll arrange it," Janine promised. "On your terms. Neutral location, specific time constraints, whatever will make you most comfortable." "Thank you," Zora said gratefully. "And Janine? I'd appreciate if this stays private. The last thing I need is the media getting wind of some dramatic family reunion story." "Of course, complete confidentiality." Over the next few days, as Janine coordinated with Thomas Harrison to arrange the meeting, Zora threw herself into work with even more intensity than usual. She had campaigns shooting for 3 different clients, fittings for Paris Fashion Week, and a charity event where she was a featured speaker, plenty to keep her mind occupied and prevent her from dwelling on the upcoming encounter with her father. The charity event, benefiting arts education in underserved communities, was particularly meaningful to Zora. She had recently established the Zora Harrison Foundation, using a portion of her modeling earnings to fund dance and visual arts programs for children who wouldn't otherwise have access to such opportunities. Standing at the podium in a sleek black gown, addressing a room full of potential donors, Zora spoke from the heart. "Art saved me," she told the audience. "Dance gave me discipline, confidence, and a means of expression when words failed. Every child deserves that opportunity, regardless of their circumstances or background." The event raised over $1 million that night, with Zora's impassioned speech moving several major donors to increase their pledges. Afterward, as she mingled with attendees, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was the kind of impact she had always hoped to make with her platform, using her visibility to create tangible change. "You were incredible tonight," said her friend May, who had also spoken at the event. "I think you might have missed your calling. Forget modeling, you should be running for office." Zora laughed, though the compliment touched her. "I'm just passionate about this cause. It's personal for me." "The best advocacy always is," May agreed. She studied Zora's face for a moment. "Something's different about you tonight. You seem, I don't know, more intense than usual. Is everything okay?" Zora hesitated, then decided to confide in her friend. "My father contacted me. After 20 years of zero communication, he suddenly wants to meet." May's eyes widened. "Wow, that's a lot. How do you feel about it?" "Conflicted, angry, curious." Zora shrugged. "I've agreed to meet him next week before I leave for Paris. If you need backup, I'm there," May offered immediately. "Or just someone to debrief with afterward." "Thanks. I might take you up on that." Later that night, as Zora prepared for bed, her phone buzzed with an email notification from Janine. The meeting with Thomas Harrison was confirmed for the following Tuesday at 2 p.m. at a private room in a midtown restaurant known for its discretion with high-profile clients. Zora stared at the confirmation, reality settling in. In 5 days, she would come face-to-face with the man who had rejected her because of her skin color, who had missed every birthday, every milestone, every triumph and struggle of her life. What would she say to him? What could he possibly say to her that would explain or justify his actions? She thought about her mother, who had worked multiple jobs to provide for her, her grandmother, who had been there for every school play and dance recital, the teachers and mentors who had believed in her potential. These were the people who had shaped her life, who had shown up when it mattered. Thomas Harrison was just a biological contributor, a stranger with familiar dimples. And yet, as Zora finally drifted off to sleep, She couldn't deny the small, quiet part of her that had always wondered about him, that had studied old photographs looking for resemblances, that had constructed elaborate scenarios in which he regretted his choice and came back to explain himself. That part of her, the little girl who had once asked when she would meet her daddy, was finally going to get an answer. The private dining room at Severin's was tastefully appointed with muted lighting, original artwork, and a table set for two. Zora arrived 15 minutes early, preferring to be the first one there, a small power move that her mother had suggested. "Don't let him set the tone," Adrian had advised during their phone call that morning. "Remember that you're doing him a favor by agreeing to this meeting, not the other way around." Zora had dressed carefully for the encounter. A cream-colored pantsuit that projected confidence and professionalism, her hair styled in a sleek updo that showcased her features. She wore minimal makeup, just enough to enhance her natural beauty without creating a mask. This was not a modeling job. She wanted Thomas Harrison to see her clearly, to face the daughter he had rejected. As she waited, she reviewed her mental boundaries for the meeting. She would listen to what he had to say, ask the questions that had haunted her for years, but she would not commit to any ongoing relationship. She would not show anger, though she felt it simmering beneath the surface. And most importantly, she would not allow him to think that his sudden interest could erase 20 years of absence. At precisely 2 o'clock, the door opened and Thomas Harrison entered the room. Zora's breath caught momentarily. It was like looking at an older male version of herself. The same dimples, the same shape of eyes, the same slight cleft in the chin. His hair was salt and pepper now, but she could see it had once been the same dark brown as her own. The genetic connection between them was undeniable, almost shocking in its clarity. Thomas stopped a few feet inside the door, his eyes fixed on Zora with an expression of wonder and something that might have been regret. "Zora," he said, his voice slightly hoarse, "thank you for agreeing to meet with me." Zora stood, extending her hand formally. "Mr. Harrison." He flinched slightly at the formal address but took her hand. His grip was firm but gentle, and he held on a moment longer than necessary as if reluctant to break this first physical connection. "Please call me Thomas, or whatever makes you comfortable." "Thomas, then," Zora said coolly, gesturing to the chair across from hers. "Please, sit." As they settled, a waiter appeared discreetly to take their drink orders. Zora requested sparkling water, while Thomas asked for the same. When they were alone again, a charged silence filled the room. "You look so much like my mother," Thomas finally said, breaking the tension. "She had those same eyes. She would have loved to meet you." "Would have?" Zora questioned. "She passed away 15 years ago," Thomas explained. "Before I—" He trailed off, seemingly unsure how to complete the thought. "Before you decided to acknowledge my existence," Zora supplied, her tone even but pointed. Thomas winced. "I deserve that. I deserve much worse, actually." He looked down at his hands, then back up at Zora, meeting her gaze directly. "I want to start by saying that I know nothing I say today can justify what I did. I abandoned you and your mother based on assumptions that were not only wrong but deeply prejudiced. There's no excuse for that." Zora remained silent, letting his words hang in the air. She had not expected him to be so forthright, had prepared herself for excuses or deflections. "I've spent the past 20 years convincing myself that I was justified in my actions," Thomas continued when Zora didn't respond. "Even after the paternity test confirmed you were my biological child, I refused to accept it. I told myself there must have been a mistake, or that your mother had somehow manipulated the results. I was so certain that I couldn't possibly have a black child that I rejected scientific evidence to the contrary." "Genetic inheritance is complex," Zora said, repeating the explanation her mother had given her years ago. "My great-grandmother on Mom's side was black. The genes expressed themselves in me." "I know that now," Thomas acknowledged. "But at the time, I was too proud, too caught up in my own assumptions to consider explanations that challenged my worldview. He paused, taking a sip of water. May I ask, when did you learn about me? About the circumstances of my departure? I found Mom's box of mementos when I was 12, Zora replied. The wedding photos, your letters, the paternity test results. I read everything and then I confronted her with questions. Thomas nodded slowly, absorbing this. And what did she tell you? The truth. That you couldn't accept I was your biological child because of how I looked. That you divorced her and provided minimal child support but wanted nothing else to do with either of us. Zora's voice remained steady, but her eyes flashed with barely contained emotion. She never lied to me about you, never made excuses for your behavior, but she also never disparaged you or tried to make me hate you. She simply presented the facts and let me form my own opinions. Your mother always was forthright, Thomas said with a small, sad smile. It was one of the things I loved about her, until it became inconvenient for me. He hesitated, then asked, How is Adrian? She's well, Zora replied, not elaborating. Her mother's life was not information Thomas had earned the right to know in detail. She's a nursing supervisor now. She worked incredibly hard to provide for me while also advancing her own education and career. Pride and shame crossed Thomas's face in equal measure. I'm not surprised. She was always determined. He took a deep breath. Zora, I know you must have questions for me. Things you've wondered about all these years. I'll answer anything you want to know with complete honesty. Zora had indeed prepared questions, had rehearsed them mentally for days. Now, faced with the opportunity to ask them, she found herself momentarily silent, weighing where to begin. Finally, she decided on the most pressing question. Why now? After 20 years of silence, why are you suddenly interested in meeting me? Thomas nodded, as if he had expected this question first. The simple answer is that someone sent me a copy of your skincare advertisement in Vogue. It was the first time I had seen you as an adult. The resemblance between us, especially the dimples, was so striking that it forced me to confront what I had done, the relationship I had rejected. So you reached out because I'm successful now? Because I have a public profile that reflects well on you? Zora's tone sharpened. No, Thomas said quickly. Though I understand why you would think that. The truth is more complicated and less flattering to me. Seeing your face, recognizing myself in your features, made it impossible for me to continue the denial I'd been living in. It forced me to acknowledge not just that you are unquestionably my daughter, but that I had missed watching an extraordinary young woman grow up because of my own prejudice and pride. And you thought what? That you could just reappear in my life and we'd have some kind of father-daughter relationship? Zora's carefully maintained composure was beginning to crack. That 20 years of absence could be erased with an apology? I didn't have any expectations, Thomas replied quietly. I wouldn't presume to think you'd want a relationship with me after what I did. I needed to see you, to apologize to your face, to acknowledge the terrible mistake I made and the harm I caused. The waiter returned to take their lunch orders, providing a momentary reprieve from the intensity of the conversation. Zora ordered a salad she wasn't sure she'd be able to eat. Thomas requested the same. When they were alone again, Zora leaned forward slightly. Did you ever think about me? During those 20 years? Did you ever wonder about the child you abandoned? Thomas's expression tightened with what appeared to be genuine pain. I told myself I didn't. I compartmentalized your existence to such an extent that I could go months, even years, without consciously thinking about you or your mother. But the truth is, you were always there, beneath the surface. Your school photos arrived each year, and though I never opened the envelopes, I kept them all in a drawer. I couldn't bring myself to throw them away. But you couldn't bring yourself to look at them either, Zora observed. No, Thomas admitted. Looking would have meant confronting what I had done, and I wasn't ready to do that. It was easier to pretend that chapter of my life didn't exist. He paused, then added softly, I missed everything. Your first steps, first words, first day of school, birthdays, holidays, graduations, all the ordinary moments and milestones that make up a childhood. I can never get those back, and neither can you. Zora felt tears threatening and blinked them back, refusing to show that vulnerability. No, we can't, she agreed. So what is it you want from this meeting? Absolution? Because I'm not sure I can give you that. I don't expect absolution, Thomas said. I don't deserve it. What I did was unforgivable on multiple levels. I abandoned my child. A fundamental betrayal of parental responsibility. I rejected you based on your appearance. A reflection of deep-seated prejudice that I had never confronted in myself. And I hurt your mother, a woman who had done nothing wrong except trust me to be a better man than I was. His candid self-assessment surprised Zora. She had expected defensiveness or minimization, not this raw acknowledgement of his failings. What I hope for, Thomas continued, is a chance to know you now, on whatever terms you're comfortable with. To learn about the remarkable person you've become, not through magazine articles or social media, but from you directly. But I also understand if that's not something you want or are ready for. Their salads arrived, providing another brief interruption. Zora picked at hers absently, her appetite diminished by the emotional strain of the conversation. I've established a trust for you, Thomas said, after they had both made minimal progress with their meals. It's a substantial amount, not that you need it given your success, but it's something I should have done years ago. Zora set down her fork, a flash of anger cutting through her careful composure. I don't want your money. I never have. Mom saved all the child support you sent in a separate account that I refused to touch for years. I only used it for college because she convinced me it was rightfully mine. I understand, Thomas said quickly. The trust isn't meant as compensation or to ease my conscience. It's simply an acknowledgement of my financial responsibility as your father, a responsibility I fulfilled only minimally during your childhood. I have my own money, Zora said firmly. I've built my own career, my own life, without your help or influence. Yes, you have, Thomas agreed, a note of genuine admiration in his voice. Everything you've accomplished is a testament to your own talent, determination, and hard work, and to your mother's incredible parenting. I had nothing to do with the impressive woman you've become, and I would never claim otherwise. Zora studied him, trying to reconcile the articulate, seemingly remorseful man before her with the cold, rejecting father she had imagined for so many years. They were the same person, of course, but Thomas had clearly changed, or at least his perspective had. Whether that change was deep and genuine or merely superficial remained to be seen. I need time, she finally said. This is a lot to process. I've spent most of my life coming to terms with your absence, constructing an identity and a life that didn't include you. I can't just flip a switch and suddenly incorporate you into that life. I understand completely, Thomas assured her. Take all the time you need. I'll be here whenever, if ever, you decide you want to continue this conversation. Paris Fashion Week engulfed Zora in a whirlwind of runway shows, fittings, and industry events that left little time for reflection on her meeting with Thomas. Walking for 3 major designers and closing the show for an up-and-coming French label that had specifically requested her, Zora maintained her professional focus despite the emotional turmoil simmering beneath the surface. It was only on her final night in Paris, after the last show had ended and the after-parties were in full swing, that Zora found herself alone in her hotel room, finally able to process the encounter with her father. She had begged off from the celebration, claiming fatigue, though the truth was she needed solitude to sort through her tangled emotions. She kicked off her heels and curled up in the plush armchair by the window, gazing out at the glittering Eiffel Tower in the distance. The city of light spread before her, beautiful and indifferent to her personal dramas. Pulling out her phone, she dialed her mother's number, despite the time difference that meant it was early morning in the States. "Zora, is everything okay?" Adrian answered, sounding alert despite the hour. "I'm fine, Mom. Just needed to talk. Did I wake you?" "I was already up for an early shift," Adrian assured her. "How was the final show?" "It went well. The collection was stunning, lots of architectural silhouettes and unexpected textures." Zora paused, then added, "But that's not why I'm calling." "You're thinking about Thomas," Adrian surmised, her voice gentle. "I can't stop replaying our meeting in my head," Zora admitted. "He was not what I expected. More remorseful, more self-aware about what he did. He didn't make excuses or try to justify his actions." "That's something at least," Adrian acknowledged. "People can change, grow, develop new perspectives. It doesn't erase what they did, but it does matter." "He wants to know me now," Zora continued. "To have some kind of relationship on my terms. I told him I needed time to think about it." She hesitated, then asked the question that had been weighing on her mind. "Would it upset you if I decided to have some kind of connection with him?" Adrian's response was immediate and firm. "Absolutely not. This is your decision, Zora, not mine. My history with Thomas is separate from your potential relationship with him. You have every right to know your father if that's what you want. But after how he treated you—" "That was between him and me," Adrian interrupted gently. "Yes, he hurt me deeply. Yes, he behaved abominably, but you are not responsible for protecting me from your own father, and you don't need to limit your choices based on loyalty to me." Zora felt tears welling up, touched by her mother's selflessness. "I don't know what to do, Mom. Part of me wants to tell him to get lost, that he lost his chance to be my father a long time ago, but another part is curious," Adrian finished for her. "Wants answers, closure, maybe even some kind of connection. That's natural, honey." "Do you think people can really change?" Zora asked, voicing the question at the heart of her uncertainty. "Or is he just feeling guilty now because I've become successful and visible?" Adrian considered this thoughtfully. "I think genuine change is possible, but rare. It usually requires a person to confront something fundamental about themselves, a belief, an assumption, a prejudice they've never questioned. From what you've told me, it sounds like seeing your success, seeing your face that so clearly resembles his own, forced Thomas to confront the reality he's been denying for 20 years. But is that enough? Can an epiphany erase 20 years of rejection?" "No," Adrian said honestly. "Nothing can erase that. The question is whether there's enough potential value in a relationship now to make it worth taking the risk of being hurt again." They talked for nearly an hour, Adrian never pushing Zora toward a particular decision but helping her explore her own feelings and options. By the time they hung up, Zora felt calmer, though still uncertain about how to proceed with Thomas. The following day, as her flight from Paris to New York cruised at 35,000 feet, Zora found herself seated next to an elderly French woman who noticed her pensive expression. "You have the weight of the world on your shoulders, it seems," the woman observed in accented English. "Too heavy for someone so young and beautiful." Zora smiled politely, not intending to share her personal dilemmas with a stranger, but something about the woman's kind, wise eyes invited confidence. "I'm trying to decide whether to forgive someone who hurt me deeply," she found herself saying. The woman nodded thoughtfully. "Ah, forgiveness. The most difficult and misunderstood of virtues." She adjusted her glasses. "May I offer a perspective? Forgiveness is not about excusing what was done to you or pretending it didn't matter. It is about freeing yourself from the burden of anger and resentment." "Even if what they did was unforgivable?" Zora asked softly. "Especially then," the woman replied, "because the most difficult acts to forgive are the ones that leave the deepest wounds. And those wounds will never heal properly if they are constantly reopened by anger." The conversation stayed with Zora long after they had parted ways at JFK Airport. As her cab navigated the familiar chaos of Manhattan traffic, taking her back to her apartment, She contemplated the French woman's words. Was she holding on to anger toward Thomas as a form of self-protection? By refusing to forgive him, was she actually keeping herself bound to the pain of his rejection? Back in her apartment, Zora dropped her luggage by the door and moved immediately to her desk, where she kept a journal. She began writing, attempting to untangle her thoughts about Thomas, about forgiveness, about what she truly wanted going forward. She was still writing when her phone rang, May, checking in after Fashion Week. "How was Paris?" her friend asked after Zora answered. "The photos of you in Marceau's finale dress are everywhere. You looked incredible." "Thanks. It was intense but good," Zora replied. "How are things on your end?" "Busy. Just booked a cosmetics campaign in Tokyo next month. But enough about work. Have you made any decisions about your father's situation?" Zora sighed. "I'm still processing. He was more genuinely remorseful than I expected, but I don't know if that changes anything. 20 years is a long time to be absent from someone's life." "It is," May agreed. "But speaking as someone who lost her father to cancer when I was 16, if there's any chance of having a positive relationship with your dad, it might be worth exploring. Once they're gone, the opportunity is gone forever." "That's a perspective I hadn't considered," Zora admitted, thinking of her friend's experience. "I've been so focused on the past, on what I lost because of his choices, that I haven't really thought about what I might gain now." "Just something to consider," May said gently. "But whatever you decide, make sure it's what you truly want, not what you think you should want or what others expect." After they hung up, Zora returned to her journal, adding new thoughts prompted by May's perspective. The blank page accepted her conflicted feelings without judgment, allowing her to explore contradictory impulses: the desire to protect herself from further hurt, the curiosity about the man who had contributed half her DNA, the tentative hope that something positive might emerge from this unexpected reconnection. 2 days later, Zora met with her therapist, Dr. Chen, whom she had been seeing regularly since her move to New York. The consistency of therapy had helped her navigate the pressures of the modeling industry and process the complex emotions surrounding her childhood and identity. "I've been thinking a lot about forgiveness," Zora told Dr. Chen after summarizing her meeting with Thomas. "Whether I can forgive him, whether I should, what that would even mean in practical terms." "Those are profound questions," Dr. Chen acknowledged. "Before we delve into forgiveness, though, I'd like to explore what you want from a potential relationship with your father. What would be the best-case scenario for you?" Zora considered this carefully. "I guess I'd want to know him, to understand who he is beyond the man who rejected me. I'd want him to know me as a person, not just as a successful model or as the child he abandoned. I'd want some kind of meaningful connection, but with clear boundaries." "And what would be your fears or concerns about pursuing such a relationship?" "That he'd disappoint me again," Zora replied immediately. "That he's not really changed, just feeling guilty because I've become visible and successful. That he'd try to take credit for my achievements or insert himself into my life in ways I'm not comfortable with." Dr. Chen nodded. "Those are valid concerns based on your history with him. Have you thought about what forgiveness might look like in this context? Because forgiveness doesn't necessarily mean reconciliation or restoration of a relationship." "What do you mean?" "Forgiveness is an internal process of releasing resentment and the desire for retribution. It's something you do for yourself, not for the other person. Reconciliation, on the other hand, is a mutual process of restoring a damaged relationship, which requires trust, accountability, and changed behavior from the person who caused harm." Zora absorbed this distinction. "So I could forgive Thomas without necessarily having him in my life?" "Exactly. Or you could choose to have some level of relationship with him while still being in the process of forgiveness, which often takes time. The important thing is that these are separate decisions." This framing helped clarify Zora's thinking. She had been conflating forgiveness with fully embracing Thomas as her father, feeling that one necessitated the other. Understanding that she could forgive him for her own peace of mind, while still maintaining whatever boundaries felt right to her, was liberating. Over the next week, as Zora returned to her busy schedule of photo shoots and meetings, the question of Thomas lingered in the background of her thoughts. She found herself observing fathers with their daughters, in restaurants, in parks, on the street, wondering about the nature of that bond, what it might have been like to have that presence in her life. One evening, as she was reviewing her upcoming commitments with her assistant, she came across an industry gala scheduled for the following month in Chicago, Thomas's city. The coincidence felt meaningful, a potential opportunity to see him again in a context that would be time-limited and on her terms. After her assistant left, Zora sat at her desk, staring at Thomas's contact information that Janine had provided. Her finger hovered over her phone, hesitating. Was she ready for another meeting? What would she say to him? She thought of her mother's unconditional support, May's perspective on lost opportunities, Dr. Chen's insights about forgiveness versus reconciliation, and the French woman's wisdom about freeing herself from the burden of anger. She thought of the little girl she had been, wondering about her father, and the woman she was now, secure in her identity and achievements. Finally, she composed a text message. "I'll be in Chicago for the Fashion Forward Gala on March 15th. If you're available, I'd be willing to meet for coffee the following morning. Zora." She pressed send before she could second-guess herself, then set her phone down, feeling a curious mix of anxiety and relief. She didn't know if this was the right decision, but it was a decision, a step toward whatever resolution awaited her relationship with Thomas Harrison. Chicago greeted Zora with biting March winds that whipped across Lake Michigan, a stark contrast to the mild New York spring she had left behind. She had arrived a day early for the Fashion Forward Gala, partly to acclimate to the city and partly to give herself mental space before both the event and her planned meeting with Thomas. The gala itself was a glittering affair held at the Art Institute, bringing together designers, models, photographers, and industry executives to raise funds for fashion education programs. As one of the featured guests, Zora wore a stunning gown by an emerging black designer, a structured creation in midnight blue with subtle geometric cutouts that highlighted her graceful form. Walking the red carpet, she smiled for the cameras, her famous dimples on full display as she answered questions about her recent campaigns and her advocacy work for diversity in the fashion industry. If anyone noticed that her smile didn't quite reach her eyes, they didn't mention it. Zora was a professional after all, adept at projecting whatever emotion a shoot or show required. Inside, as she mingled with colleagues and admirers, she found herself scanning the crowd, half expecting to see Thomas there despite not having invited him. The gala was a major industry event, drawing attendees from Chicago's business elite, exactly the circles in which he would move. But he wasn't present, or if he was, their paths didn't cross. "You seem distracted tonight," observed Janine, who had flown in from New York for the event. "Everything okay?" "Just tired," Zora replied, offering a practiced smile. "And thinking about tomorrow." Janine nodded in understanding. She was one of the few people who knew about Zora's planned meeting with Thomas. "It's not too late to cancel if you're having second thoughts." "I'm not," Zora said, surprising herself with how true it felt. "I need to do this, for my own closure if nothing else." The following morning dawned clear and cold. Zora had chosen a small, upscale cafe in the Gold Coast neighborhood for their meeting, public enough to feel safe, but quiet enough for a private conversation. She arrived early, selecting a table in a secluded corner where they wouldn't be easily observed or overheard. She had dressed carefully in slim black trousers and a cream-colored cashmere sweater, elegant but understated, professional but not unapproachable. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her makeup minimal. This wasn't a performance or a photo shoot. She wanted to present herself authentically. Thomas arrived precisely on time, dressed in a well-tailored suit that he must have come directly from his office. He hesitated at the entrance, scanning the cafe until he spotted her, and then approached with a mixture of eagerness and uncertainty on his face. "Zora," he greeted her, standing awkwardly beside the table. "Thank you for suggesting this meeting. I wasn't sure I'd hear from you again." "I wasn't sure either," she admitted, gesturing for him to sit. "But I'm trying to make decisions based on what I want now, not on anger about the past." Thomas nodded, seeming to understand the significance of this statement. "That shows remarkable maturity and self-awareness. I'm still working on separating my present choices from my past mistakes." A server approached and they both ordered coffee, Zora a cappuccino, Thomas an Americano. When they were alone again, an expectant silence settled between them. "I saw coverage of the gala last night," Thomas said, breaking the silence. "You looked stunning. That dress was remarkable." "Thank you," Zora replied, accepting the compliment with a slight nod. "The designer is someone to watch, Elijah West. He's redefining evening wear with architectural elements inspired by African art." "I'd like to learn more about your work," Thomas said tentatively. "Not just the modeling that's visible to the public, but what it means to you, what you hope to accomplish with your platform." Zora studied him, trying to gauge his sincerity. She had prepared herself for this meeting by setting clear internal boundaries about what she was willing to share and what remained private. To her surprise, she found herself wanting to tell him about her career, her aspirations, the meaning she had found in an industry often dismissed as superficial. "Modeling was never my end goal," she began, wrapping her hands around her cappuccino cup. "It was a means to an end initially, a way to help pay for college. But I've discovered it can be much more than that. I have visibility now, influence. I can advocate for causes I care about, support designers of color, challenge beauty standards that have historically excluded people who look like me." Thomas listened intently, his expression thoughtful. "You're using your success to create meaningful change. That's admirable." "I'm trying," Zora acknowledged. "The fashion industry has a long history of problematic practices, exploitation, cultural appropriation, extreme thinness as an ideal. But it's also a powerful platform for self-expression and cultural conversation. I'm interested in the positive potential, in how fashion can be a force for inclusion rather than exclusion." Their coffees arrived, providing a brief interruption. When the server departed, Thomas leaned forward slightly. "I've been following your foundation's work," he said. "The dance programs for underserved communities, the scholarship initiatives. It's impressive." Zora felt a flicker of surprise. "You've been researching me." "Yes," Thomas admitted without apology. "I've been trying to understand the woman you've become in my absence. Your public accomplishments are easy to find, but they only tell part of the story." "What else do you want to know?" Zora asked, curiosity mingling with caution. Thomas seemed to consider his words carefully. "I'd like to know what shaped you. What experiences, what values, what relationships made you the person you are today? I'd like to know what your childhood was like, what you loved, what challenged you. I'd like to know about the years I missed, not just the achievements, but the ordinary moments." The request was both reasonable and overwhelming. How could she possibly condense 20 years of life into a cafe conversation? And why should she share those precious memories with someone who had chosen not to be part of creating them? "That's a lot to ask," she said finally. "Those years, my childhood, my adolescence, they belong to me and to the people who were actually there. My mother, my grandmother, my friends, my teachers. You chose not to be one of those people." Thomas flinched slightly but nodded. "You're right. I have no claim to those memories or experiences. He paused, searching for words. "I'm trying to understand what I threw away. Not to insert myself retroactively into your life, but to fully comprehend the magnitude of what my prejudice and pride cost both of us." There was raw honesty in his voice that caught Zora off guard. She had expected defensiveness, perhaps even entitlement, but this humble acknowledgement of loss disarmed her somewhat. "I had a good childhood," she said after a moment, offering a measured response to his question. Not perfect or privileged, but full of love and stability. Mom worked incredibly hard to make sure I had opportunities, dance lessons, good schools, summer camps. Grandma was there every day after school, teaching me to cook, helping with homework, telling stories about our family history. Thomas listened, his expression a mixture of relief that she had been well cared for and regret that he hadn't been part of it. "Your mother was always remarkable," he said softly. "Even when we were young, she had this quiet strength, this absolute clarity about what mattered." "She never spoke badly of you," Zora continued, watching his reaction closely. "Even when I found out the truth and was angry, she never encouraged that anger. She just presented facts and let me form my own opinions." "That sounds like Adrienne," Thomas acknowledged, his voice thick with emotion. "She always had more integrity than I did, more compassion." He hesitated, then asked, "May I ask what your opinion was? When you learned about me? About what I'd done?" Zora took a sip of her cappuccino, considering how much of her inner world to reveal. "I was hurt," she finally said, confused. "I couldn't understand how my own father could reject me because of how I looked. It made me question my worth, my identity. For a while I was angry. At you, at a world that judged people by their skin color. But eventually I realized that your choices reflected your limitations, not mine." Thomas winced at her frank assessment but didn't attempt to defend himself. "I wish I could undo that damage," he said quietly. "Not just for my sake, but for yours. No child should ever have to question their worth because of a parent's failings." "I worked through it," Zora said, not unkindly but not offering absolution either. "I had good support systems, people who valued and affirmed me, and as I got older, I developed a clearer understanding of how racism operates, not just the obvious kind, but the subtle prejudices that people often don't even recognize in themselves." Thomas nodded, his expression somber. "I've been doing a lot of reflection on that since our first meeting, examining beliefs and assumptions I've carried my whole life without questioning. It's been uncomfortable, to say the least, but necessary." "Growth usually is uncomfortable," Zora observed, studying his face for signs of sincerity. She was looking for indications that this was more than performative remorse, that he was genuinely engaging in the difficult work of confronting his own biases. "May I ask you something personal?" Thomas ventured after a moment. When Zora nodded cautiously, he continued, "Do you think forgiveness is possible? Not that I deserve it, but is it something you could ever envision?" The question hung in the air between them, weighty with implication. Zora thought of her conversations with her mother, with Dr. Chen, with the French woman on the plane. She thought about the distinction between forgiveness and reconciliation, about the burden of carrying anger, about what she truly wanted for her own future peace of mind. "I think forgiveness is a process, not an event," she finally replied. "It's something I'm working on, for my own well-being more than anything else. Holding on to anger doesn't serve me." She paused, choosing her next words with care. "But forgiveness doesn't necessarily mean forgetting, and it doesn't automatically translate to having a relationship." Thomas absorbed this, nodding slowly. "That's fair. More than fair, actually." He seemed to gather his courage before continuing. "If I may ask one more thing, what would a relationship look like to you if you were to consider having any kind of connection with me going forward? What boundaries or expectations would you have?" It was a question Zora had been pondering since their first meeting, trying to envision what role, if any, Thomas might play in her life. She had discussed it extensively with Dr. Chen, exploring her own needs and comfort levels. "I'm not ready for anything that resembles a traditional father-daughter relationship," she began, watching his expression carefully. "That opportunity was lost a long time ago, but I might be open to something more like acquaintances moving toward friendship, getting to know each other gradually, with clear boundaries and limited expectations." Relief and gratitude washed over Thomas's face. I would welcome that, on whatever terms make you comfortable. I know I have no right to expect any place in your life, and the fact that you're even considering it means more than I can express. I'm not making any promises, Zora cautioned. This is tentative, exploratory, and it depends on consistent respect for my boundaries. Understood, Thomas said quickly. Completely understood. They spent the next hour in cautious conversation, finding their way to topics that felt safe. Books they had both enjoyed, places they had traveled, their shared appreciation for jazz music. Zora revealed small pieces of herself, her love of ballet, her interest in architectural design, her dream of eventually creating a fashion line focused on sustainable materials. Thomas spoke of his work with environmental investment portfolios, his recent interest in photography, his growing collection of art by Black creators. As their meeting drew to a close, Thomas reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small, flat box. "I have something for you," he said hesitantly. "Not a gift exactly, more of a return, something that always should have been yours." Curious despite herself, Zora accepted the box and opened it. Inside lay a delicate gold chain with a small pendant, a perfectly formed ballet dancer in mid-pirouette. "This belonged to my mother, your grandmother," Thomas explained. "She was a dancer in her youth, before she married and had children. When I was going through her things after she passed, I found this with a note saying it should go to her first granddaughter. That's you, Zora." Zora stared at the necklace, unexpectedly moved by this tangible connection to a grandmother she had never known. "She knew about me?" "Yes," Thomas admitted, looking down at his hands. "I told her when Adrienne was pregnant. She was excited to be a grandmother. After I left, I never told her what I had done. I let her believe that Adrienne had left me and taken you. It was another lie in a long series of self-serving deceptions." Zora touched the pendant gently. "Thank you for giving me this. It means a lot to have this connection to her." As they prepared to leave the cafe, an awkward moment arose. Should they shake hands? Hug? Simply nod goodbye? Zora resolved the question by extending her hand formally, which Thomas took with evident gratitude, holding it perhaps a moment longer than strictly necessary. "Thank you for meeting with me," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Whatever comes next, whether you decide you want any kind of ongoing connection or not, I want you to know that I'm proud of the woman you've become. Your mother did an extraordinary job raising you, and you've clearly made the most of every opportunity through your own hard work and talent." Zora nodded, acknowledging his words without fully accepting the praise implicit in them. "I'll be in touch if and when I'm ready for further communication," she said, maintaining her emotional boundaries while leaving the door slightly ajar for future contact. As she watched Thomas walk away, disappearing into the flow of Chicago pedestrians, Zora felt a curious lightness. Not resolution or closure exactly, but a sense that she had faced something important and emerged with her dignity and self-determination intact. Whatever happened next would be her choice, on her terms, and there was profound power in that knowledge. 6 months after their Chicago meeting, Zora stood backstage at New York Fashion Week, waiting for her cue to walk the runway for a prominent designer's spring collection. Through the chaos of stylists making last-minute adjustments and photographers capturing behind-the-scenes moments, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in a nearby mirror, poised, confident, centered. Around her neck gleamed the delicate gold dancer pendant that had once belonged to her grandmother. In the months since receiving it, she had worn it often, finding unexpected comfort in this connection to her paternal heritage. The necklace had become a talisman of sorts, a reminder that identity was complex, that family history couldn't be neatly categorized or denied. 2 minutes, Zora, called the show coordinator, clipboard in hand. Zora nodded, settling deeper into the focused state that allowed her to command the runway with the poise that had become her signature. As she strode down the catwalk moments later, her face composed in the serene expression that had launched 1,000 campaigns. Few in the audience would have guessed at the personal journey unfolding beneath her professional facade. The fashion world saw Zora Harrison, sought-after model and emerging industry leader. Only she knew the careful steps she had been taking toward a measured reconciliation with her father. It had begun with occasional text messages after Chicago, brief, polite exchanges that gradually increased in frequency and depth. Thomas had respected her boundaries, never pushing for more than she offered, expressing interest in her work and life without presuming intimacy they hadn't earned. When Zora had been featured on the cover of Time magazine's Next Generation Leaders issue, he had sent a simple message: "Incredibly proud of your accomplishments and your advocacy. Your voice matters." 3 months after Chicago, she had agreed to another in-person meeting, this time when Thomas was in New York for a business conference. They had walked through the Metropolitan Museum of Art together, finding neutral ground in discussions of art and history. It had been awkward at times, but increasingly comfortable as they discovered shared interests and perspectives. Now, as Fashion Week concluded and Zora prepared for a major campaign shoot in Morocco, she faced a decision she had been contemplating for weeks. Her mother's 50th birthday was approaching, and Adrian had requested only one gift: a family dinner with Zora and her grandmother at their favorite restaurant in their hometown. Zora had been considering whether to invite Thomas to join them. The idea was fraught with complexity. Would her mother welcome Thomas's presence on her special day, or would it resurface painful memories? Would her grandmother, who had witnessed Adrian's heartbreak firsthand, be able to sit across from the man who had caused it? And was Zora herself ready to present Thomas to the two women who had raised her, implicitly acknowledging him as part of her life again? After the final show, Zora returned to her apartment, emotionally and physically drained from the intensity of Fashion Week. She had promised to call her mother that evening to finalize birthday plans. Before making that call, she needed clarity on what she truly wanted. She brewed a cup of tea and settled on her small balcony overlooking the city, watching as the autumn sunset painted Manhattan in shades of gold and rose. The past 6 months had been a process of cautious reconnection with Thomas, each step taken with deliberate care. She had maintained firm boundaries, been clear about her expectations, and watched carefully for any signs that he wasn't genuinely committed to the difficult work of confronting his past prejudices. To her surprise, Thomas had consistently shown up as a more thoughtful, more humble person than the man who had rejected her 20 years ago. He had engaged seriously with books she recommended on race and identity, sought out diverse perspectives in his professional and personal life, and most importantly, listened more than he spoke when difficult topics arose. Their evolving relationship was nothing like a conventional father-daughter bond. It was something new, something they were creating together, a connection between adults with a complicated shared history, but a genuine desire to move forward with integrity. Zora picked up her phone and called her mother. "Hey, baby," Adrian answered warmly. "How did the last show go?" "It went well," Zora replied, smiling at her mother's familiar greeting. "The collection was beautiful. Very innovative use of sustainable materials, which you know I love." They chatted about Fashion Week for a few minutes before Zora steered the conversation toward the upcoming birthday celebration. "Mom, I've been thinking about your birthday dinner, and there's something I want to run by you." "What's that, honey?" Zora took a deep breath. "I've been in contact with Thomas over the past few months. We've met a couple of times, talked quite a bit. It's been surprisingly positive." She paused, then continued carefully. "I've been considering asking him to join us for your birthday dinner, but only if you're completely comfortable with that. Your birthday should be exactly what you want it to be." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. Then Adrian asked softly, "Is this relationship with him important to you, Zora? Is it something you want to pursue?" "I think it is," Zora admitted. "Not as a replacement for what I had with you and Grandma. Nothing could ever replace that. But as something additional, something that might have value in its own way." He's changed, Mom. Or maybe he's finally facing parts of himself he never had the courage to confront before. Another pause. Then Adrienne said, "If having Thomas there would make the evening more meaningful for you, then I'm open to it. Your grandmother might take some convincing, but she loves you more than she dislikes him." "Are you sure?" Zora pressed. "I don't want to make your birthday about him or about our complicated history. Honey, at 50, I've learned that life is too short for unnecessary divisions. If you and Thomas are building something positive, I don't want to stand in the way of that. And honestly, I'm curious to see who he's become after all these years." The maturity and generosity of her mother's response brought tears to Zora's eyes. "You're amazing, you know that? Most people in your position wouldn't be nearly so gracious." "Well, I've had an excellent role model in forgiveness and emotional intelligence, my daughter," Adrienne replied with audible affection. "Now let me call your grandmother and work on her. She might need more convincing than I did." After ending the call with her mother, Zora sat quietly for a moment, absorbing the significance of what had just transpired. Then she composed a careful text to Thomas. "My mother's 50th birthday is coming up. We're having a small family dinner on the 15th. If you're available and interested, I'd like you to join us." His response came quickly. "I would be honored. Thank you for including me. Please let me know if there's anything I can do to help make Adrienne's day special." 2 weeks later, Zora found herself in the surreal position of watching her mother and father interact for the first time in over 20 years. They had arranged to meet at the restaurant a few minutes before the reservation, allowing for a private moment of reconnection before Zora's grandmother arrived. Thomas had aged well, his salt and pepper hair and distinguished bearing giving him a dignified appearance as he stood nervously outside the restaurant holding a tasteful arrangement of flowers. Not roses, which might have seemed romantic, but elegant lilies and orchids that acknowledged the occasion without presumption. Adrienne approached him with composed grace, the years having enhanced rather than diminished her natural beauty. Her hair was styled in sophisticated twists with subtle silver strands that she had chosen not to color, her figure trim in a deep blue dress that complemented her complexion. "Adrienne," Thomas said, his voice catching slightly. "Happy birthday. You look wonderful." "Thank you, Thomas," she replied, accepting the flowers with a polite smile. "It's been a long time." "Too long," he acknowledged, his eyes conveying regret for reasons that went far beyond mere time. "Thank you for allowing me to be here today." Zora watched this exchange from a slight distance, giving them space while remaining close enough to intervene if needed. But her mother, as always, handled the situation with dignity and poise, neither coldly distant nor falsely warm, simply present and authentic. When Zora's grandmother arrived moments later, the tension briefly spiked. Eleanor Johnson had been Adrienne's rock during the painful divorce and subsequent years of single parenthood. Her initial greeting to Thomas was cool, her expression making it clear that she had neither forgotten nor fully forgiven his actions. "Eleanor," Thomas said respectfully, "it's good to see you again. I want to thank you for the central role you played in raising Zora. She's an extraordinary young woman, and that's in large part due to your influence." This acknowledgement of her contribution seemed to soften Eleanor slightly. "She was never a difficult child to raise," she replied. "She had a natural goodness from the beginning." As they were seated at their table, Zora felt a curious mixture of anxiety and hope. This dinner represented something she had never anticipated. All the significant adults in her life gathered in one place, navigating a complex history for her sake. The conversation was careful at first, focusing on neutral topics: Zora's recent work, Adrienne's position at the hospital, Eleanor's community garden project. Thomas spoke briefly about his environmental investment initiatives, seeming conscious of not dominating the conversation or drawing too much attention to his own accomplishments. As the meal progressed and a bottle of wine was shared, sparkling water for Eleanor, who didn't drink, the atmosphere gradually relaxed. Thomas asked thoughtful questions about Zora's childhood, listening attentively as Adrian and Eleanor shared stories of dance recitals, science fair projects, and family vacations. He didn't attempt to insert himself retroactively into these memories, but expressed genuine appreciation for the experiences that had shaped his daughter. When dessert arrived, a cake the restaurant had prepared for Adrian's birthday, Thomas raised his glass in a toast. To Adrian, on her 50th birthday, your strength, wisdom, and unwavering love have created not just a remarkable daughter, but a better world for all who know you. I am profoundly grateful that Zora had you as her guiding light. Tears shimmered briefly in Adrian's eyes at this acknowledgement. Thank you, Thomas, she said simply, raising her own glass in response. Later, as they were preparing to leave, Thomas pulled Zora aside for a quiet moment. I want you to know how much this evening has meant to me, he said, his voice low with emotion. Seeing you with your mother and grandmother, witnessing the beautiful family you three have created, it's humbling and inspiring. Thank you for allowing me this glimpse of what I missed, painful as it is to realize the full extent of what my prejudice cost us all. Zora studied his face, seeing genuine remorse but also a new awareness that seemed to go beyond personal regret to a deeper understanding of systemic issues. This is just one evening, she reminded him gently. We're still figuring out what our relationship is, what it can be. I know, Thomas assured her, and I'll continue to respect your pace and boundaries. I'm just grateful for whatever connection you're willing to share. As they rejoined Adrian and Eleanor, who were chatting with the restaurant owner, Zora felt a sense of cautious optimism about the future. The evening hadn't been perfect. There had been moments of tension, of awkward silence, of painful awareness of all that had been lost. But there had also been moments of genuine connection, of mutual respect, of possibilities opening where before there had been only closed doors. Outside the restaurant, as they prepared to go their separate ways, Thomas to his hotel, Zora and her mother and grandmother to the family home for the remainder of the weekend, Adrian surprised everyone by initiating a brief hug with Thomas. Thank you for coming, she said as she stepped back. It meant a lot to Zora, and that means a lot to me. Thank you for welcoming me, Thomas replied, visibly moved by the gesture. Your generosity of spirit has always been your greatest strength, Adrian. Eleanor, not to be outdone in graciousness, extended her hand to Thomas. You have a long way to go to make up for 20 years, she said bluntly, but showing up today was a start. Thomas accepted this assessment with a nod of acknowledgement. I couldn't agree more, Eleanor. I'm committed to the journey, however long it takes. As they said their final goodbyes, Zora found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From the infant rejected by her father because of her skin color, to the successful model whose face had inadvertently prompted his recognition and remorse, to the young woman now cautiously allowing him a place in her adult life. It had been a path marked by pain, but also by profound growth. Walking arm in arm with her mother and grandmother, the two women who had been her constants, her champions, her true north, Zora felt a deep gratitude for the family they had created together. And if there was now room in her life for a relationship with her father, not to replace what she had, but to add another dimension to her understanding of herself and her history, that too was something to be grateful for. The future remained unwritten, the path forward not yet clear, but Zora Harrison had never been afraid of uncharted territory. She had built a remarkable life and career by embracing challenges, by remaining true to her values, by finding beauty and meaning even in difficult circumstances. Whatever came next in her evolving relationship with Thomas, she would face it with the same courage, integrity, and grace that had brought her this far. And that, perhaps, was the most powerful form of forgiveness, not forgetting the past or excusing its injuries, but refusing to let those injuries determine her future. In choosing to engage with Thomas on her own terms, Zora was exercising the ultimate freedom, the freedom to write her own story, to define her own identity, to create meaning from even the most painful chapters of her life. As she walked away from the restaurant that night, the gold dancer pendant catching the streetlight at her throat, Zora felt the weight of generational patterns shifting, old wounds beginning to heal, new possibilities taking root. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. Life rarely offered those, but it was something equally valuable, a genuine beginning, grounded in truth, nurtured by compassion, and open to whatever growth might yet be possible. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.